Well, like Dr. Knox said, Alex Putnam, I've been recruiting for 14 years. I came right out of college, and what I did, I actually came out of college and went to a recruiting firm and started recruiting right out of school. And I remember going through the interview process, going through my career center and all those things, and I had no clue. I didn't know anything about interviewing or how to interview, or I had a friend that was like, hey, you need to get a suit, you need to get a tie. So I've been there. It hasn't been that long ago. I do remember it. So, and I do want you guys to ask any questions. A little bit about my background. I've been on the corporate and the agency side, meaning I've done recruiting for a company that all we do is recruit, and we go to other companies and we recruit for them. And then I've been internal to companies, Panasonic being one, and that was the bulk of my career. And there, we were a startup R&D center, so research and design center, and we were going from the ground up. We went from 88 to 600 employees with global locations. So we hired a lot of college students. And I've hired a lot of college students to come work for me as recruiters and salespeople as well. So there's a lot of things that I look for when I'm doing that. And what I tried to do is I kind of took it and broke it down into about 5 categories that I'll show you. But the one thing that everybody always tells you is how do you stand out? And it's all about from the time I walk in the door, I've got an impression of you. As soon as I walk in, I've got something. And here's this story that somebody told me. There was a student, he wanted to get into the university, and this certain school had very stringent standards. They wanted creative students. So they take him into this room, and this is a true story. He was sitting there, and so he walks into the interview, and the guy's sitting there with his paper up, and didn't make any eye contact or anything. And he said, you got 30 seconds to get my attention. So he continued reading his paper. So the student took a lighter, or a box of matches that was sitting there, and he set the paper on fire. And he passed the interview. He went on to the next step. So, unless we have pyromaniacs in here, I'm not suggesting let's burn anything down. But the point to that is he did something creative. He thought fast, and everybody's not naturally a fast thinker, going to think on your feet. But think about just those little things. And it could be as simple as the tie you wear, or for the ladies, if you wear a scarf or a certain jacket. I mean, there's tons of just little things that are going to stand out. And I try to think of the most memorable things for me that stand out through this process. And one of the first things you're going to do, and I'm going to talk kind of pre-interview, you're going to do phone screens. And all this information, you guys, if you want this, I'll make sure that I'm going to put it up on a blog and everything so that you guys can have access to it and have access to the notes and everything. So, feel free to take notes, but I will make sure that you have access to all this. One of the first steps you're ever going to do is a phone screen. And I know on campus, when you go through the campus interviewing a lot of times, you're going to go through and you kind of meet with the recruiter of the company. You go into the room, you spend your 30 minutes, they decide if they're going to bring you back or not. A lot of times they'll do an initial phone screen, and that's becoming more and more prevalent these days. And a couple of things here I tell people is, don't be caught unprepared. So if somebody calls and catches you out of the blue and says, hey, is this a good time to talk? I'm hiring manager from XYZ. If it's not, it's okay to request time. It's okay to say, I'm on my way to class, or I've got a class or something like that. Can I call you back, or can I get a number to call you back? Offer to call them back. But that gives you time to prepare and ask good questions. It's going to be very rare coming out of college, though, that you're going to get a surprise phone screen. It could happen. Very rare coming out of college. I tell people, always prepare like it's the in-person interview. So let's say you do have a phone screen that you know is going to happen. I tell people, go ahead, put your suit on just like you're doing a real interview. Get ready, go through your routine. Get in a chair, find a place where you're going to have the interview. And I always tell people on down at the minute, find a landline. Don't do it on your cell phone. Cell phones break up, get crackly, roommate comes in. Find that quiet place and just do it just like you're going into the interview. And that way, if you're prepared that way, it'll come across that way. A lot of times when you're doing interviews, people shuffling on a keyboard or doing something else, that's a huge negative. And I've actually ended interviews at that point where I heard somebody wasn't paying attention, and I said, it doesn't sound like you're very interested in this at this time. And they're kind of taken off guard, and maybe they are, maybe they're not, but you want to give that full attention, because I don't know, they may be on Google looking up answers. I don't know. Obviously quiet place with no distractions, landline, and always after the phone screen, initiate the question, ask the question to get that in-person interview. Ask for when can you come on site, when can you come visit. That's essential. If they have a time, I always tell people Your schedule should always be clear. Granted, if you have a class or something like that that you can't get around, but I would say if there's a window of 72 hours, surely there's a time free in there. You don't want to put it off too long. Well, I've got this, this, and this, and 3 weeks from now, you don't want to do that. Talk with confidence, because that's going to come across in your voice. How you answer those questions, how you're speaking is going to come across in the phone. You have to have that confidence. So we'll talk about that a little later. So what I call the 7-second impression. As soon as you walk in the room as a recruiter, any recruiter has already made an assumption about you. I mean, the minute you walk in, that first 7 seconds. And the things they look for are, how confident is that person? Did they have a firm handshake? Did they make eye contact? And what was their introduction like? You know, was it simple? And I tell people, hello, my name is Alex, great to meet you. Simple introduction, it's nothing. And I got a list of the questions that you guys asked, so a lot of this is in there too. Firm handshake. Somebody asked the question, if, let's say I go to make the handshake and I miss, you know, I kind of catch it like this, what do you do? I've done that, and it happens. And I'll tell people, I'll be like, hey, you know, sorry about that. Let me get a better handshake in. And I'll get a better handshake. That shows confidence. It shows, okay, you know what? I've had a misstep, but I recovered quickly. And trust me, recruiters, they do look at this. They want to see how quickly you recover on those type of things. Now, usually an interview is going to last about 30 minutes. That's another question. Usually they're about 30 minutes long. And so you got the 7-second impression. I've already made a judgment. Now you've got 29 minutes and 53 seconds to sell me on yourself. And I've got my questions that I'm going to ask, but some of the things I'm looking for, or how you can be prepared, is be knowledgeable. You know, do your homework. There was a lot of questions around how much research to do and what do I need to know. And I say do everything you can. Go to their websites, which websites are static. And we all know that. So the website's going to give you what the company wants you to know about them. But now there's company blogs. There's blogs of people. There's a couple of, I have this listed on my blog. There's a group called Glassdoor.com. And you definitely want to check that site out. It's just Glassdoor.com. And what they do is it's people who write about what they think about a company. So let's say that I worked at Panasonic. I can go in and I can write about my experience there. Let's say I interviewed at Panasonic this week. I can go in there and write about my interview, the questions they asked me, what I thought about it, you know, how they treated me through the interview process. You have to take it with a grain of salt because there's going to be some good and some bad. You know, some employees have a bad experience. So kind of look at the whole, but they also rank the CEO. So everybody gets to rank the CEO, and they'll tell you if he's a 20% favorable or 85% favorable. So great site to do research on. I always tell people 3 degrees. More than likely, you're going to be 3 degrees away. How many people are on LinkedIn? People use LinkedIn? Okay. Definitely get on there. If you're junior, senior mix, how many people we have are seniors here getting ready to graduate? Okay, juniors? Anybody? Freshman, sophomore? Okay, wow. Good for y'all. Get on LinkedIn. I call it the business person's Facebook if you're not on it. It's not as interactive as Facebook. It's not as personal. You're putting more of your professional side on there, but you can join groups. You can look up companies. You can connect to people. And people love connecting to college students. There's a UGA Alumni Center. I'm sure there's one for students, soon to graduate, different schools. If you're in business school or engineering school, there's all kind of different schools. They have them. So get on there. You can always find somebody on there. And I get people all the time. I graduated from the University of Alabama. Don't hold it against me. And I connected to my group there, and I get people all the time that email me questions about, hey, I'm getting ready to graduate, or, what do you think about this? So they see that I'm a recruiter, and they want to pick my brain. Number one, be honest and transparent. I mean, tell the truth about your resume. Don't make up excuses if there's a shortcoming. Offer solutions. And the number one thing I see is GPA. And I had a guy about 2 weeks ago I interviewed, Georgia Tech grad. Go ahead. 3.9 GPA, computer science. I mean, this guy, he was getting ready to graduate in December, or he graduated in December, and he doesn't have a job. He's stellar. I mean, from I look at his paper, this is a guy that most companies I know want to hire. But my question to him was, I said, okay, you're 3.9, and he knew it. He walked in, and he was very confident. He knew it. And I asked him, I said, well, if you graduated in December, and we're now in February, why didn't you have a job lined up in November? I mean, you're 3.9 from Georgia Tech. And his answer was, well, I was too busy studying. That that was not a good answer. And the reason why it wasn't a good answer, because I knew that that wasn't the case. Because as I talked to him, and I kind of picked through his career, I could just kind of see that he just was kind of taking it easy. He thought that I've got this 3.9, and whether it's true or not, that was my impression. He just thought, okay, I'm gonna get a job because I got a 3.9 from Georgia Tech, and he said, I want to do software development. I want to be a developer. Well, I tried to explain to him, most companies don't hire you in as a developer. They're going to bring you in, you're going to do testing, learn it, and then move into development. Well, I want to be a developer. So set realistic expectations. And what I tell people, understand the job that you're going for. So if you're interviewing for a job or interviewing with a company, don't just know the company, but know a little bit about the job. If you are in marketing and you want to be a marketing agent, know what that does. Know the career path of it. I didn't know I wanted to be a recruiter. I just kind of landed into it. I dropped my resume. I had an extra resume, and I dropped it into the folder, and that's before we did all the online stuff. And I just dropped it into the folder, and I got a call, and I got the job. But so it was kind of sheer luck. I didn't know anything about being a recruiter, but before I went to that first interview, I knew everything about being a recruiter. I tell people also, don't be a bad date. Offer interesting stories. Tell stories that are short. You don't want to talk too long. You don't want to talk too short. And at the end, we're going to go through some general questions that companies ask, just some basic things that they're going to ask you. And you can prepare for that. I mean, you can have small 30-second to 2-minute stories to answer those questions. Engage in the conversation. Just like above, just like the don't be a bad date, it's two-way. It's a two-way conversation. So engage the person in conversation. Some of the key categories now, these are the ones that I want to talk about, and this is what recruiters look for. When I'm looking to hire somebody, or I'm looking to hire somebody for my company, or I'm in the company, whatever, somebody's coming out of college, I don't expect them to have a lot of experience, but I am looking for their personality, and I'm not saying you have to be, Mr. or Miss Congeniality, but I am looking for personality and what they're like. I'm looking for experience, what have they done? It doesn't have to be work-related. I actually hired a recruiting assistant one time. She was from UGA. She had just came out of school, and she had no work experience, but she was planning a wedding. I said, well, what are you doing to plan for your wedding? How are you planning for it? She said, well, I've got this book. I said, well, bring it to your interview. So she comes in, she has this binder like this thick. And she comes in, it's like, boom, she plops it on the table, and you plop it out, and everything's there, and it's all tabbed, it's all in order. And I had just gotten married. My wife is highly organized, had done the same thing. So I knew she was an organized individual, but she was able to show me an example of that. But that's experience. That's not a job. I'll talk about this, but relationship. I'm looking to see what kind of relationships you have. What do I think? How do I think your personality or you as a person is going to fit in with the rest of my organization or the rest of the team? How do you develop relationships? Also, how do you communicate? How do you speak to me? And that's written, verbal, body language. There's tons of things. And also the long-term outlook. When I hire somebody, I'm not typically hiring somebody because I want them to work for me for 6 months or a year and then leave. In my mind, as an employer, I'm thinking, this person's going to be here 5 years. That may or may not be the case. You may think, I want to do 3 years and then move on to this, and that's okay. But I'm looking for that long-term outlook. So personality, and I'm going to break that down. And this is kind of where I'm getting some of my notes here, but attitude, your appearance, your confidence, your approachability, and your professionalism. And I'm going to give you a good website to go to. On approachability, there's a guy. His name is Scott. His website is, hello, my name is Scott. And this guy wears a name tag, and he does it 24/7, 365. And I heard him speak about 2 years ago, but he has a different take. I mean, I think as college students, you would enjoy him because he's definitely not a corporate guy just coming up and just kind of, suit and tie and telling you. He has a lot of personality and a lot of charisma, but all he talks about, he's written several books on it, is approachability, how to be approachable, and he takes a whole different stance on it, and I really like his stuff. I'm going to talk about attitude first. Be honest. I talked about that. Show enthusiasm for the job and the degree. What type of majors do we have in here? What's different majors? Psychology. Horticulture. Biology. Math. Political science. So, and you just shout it out. But why'd you guys choose those majors? What is it about those majors that you chose those majors? Good at it. Okay. Enjoy it. That's a real question you're going to get. And that's kind of one of my first questions that I ask college students is, here's your major. Why is it? Even more than GPA. I mean, I'm going to look at GPA. We're going to talk about GPA. It is going to come up, so hopefully I know everybody in here is a 3.0 or better. But it is going to come up. But again, if I see that you're passionate about your degree, that you took mathematics, and I know that's a hard major, but I know that you're passionate about it, we'll delve into it. If you had a 2.5, I'm sure you don't. It's 3.5, I'm certain. But if it were 2.5, we'll delve into that. But I'm looking for that passion. Why is it that you want to do that? Why do you do what you do? So show that passion. And don't be nervous. A lot of people, some of the questions revolved around, what do I do if I'm nervous, or how do I overcome being nervous? We all get nervous. Everybody does. I mean, coming in here, I've spoken to groups and people before. I get a little nervous. I mean, everybody does. But how do you overcome it is prepare. One of the things I do is before I do anything like this, I practice it. I sit. I go through it with my wife. She looks at it, and she picks it apart, and she's good at that. But we didn't. She's like, well, this doesn't make sense. I don't like that color, or anything like that. So, but practice with yourself. Practice going through it. Appearance, and I'm going to talk about this a lot. And it's not about being a fashion model or walking off of a GQ cover or something like that. It's not about that. But it is about having a positive body language. When I come in the room, how do I walk into the room? How does my suit fit? When I was graduating from college, I didn't have the money to go have a tailored suit or anything like that. But I found one that fit. How did I tie my tie? I didn't know how to tie a tie. I worked at a grocery store when I was in high school, and I had the cloth knit tie. I bet nobody remembers those. You may remember that. I was pointing up there. The cloth knit. I didn't know how to tie that thing. I remember I went to the store where I bought it, and I grew up in a small town of 500 people. And I went to the little small town where I bought the tie, and I said, "Can you teach me how to tie a tie?" And the guy goes, "My dad didn't know how to tie a tie. He'd worked construction his whole life." So the guy goes in, he ties my ties. Well, I never untied them. I just loosened them up and put them up because I didn't know how to tie them. So, but there's tons now. You can Google it. You can see how to tie ties and tie knots. And I tell people, for guys, if you're a huskier guy, double Windsor knot looks good, makes it slim down. Ladies, you're not going to wear a tie most likely, but suit. And I'll tell you experience I had here, and it's on the ladies' side. So I was interviewing students, recruiter sales position, looking for lots of personality. Had lots of personality come through the room. And I'll never forget, this was several years ago. Interviewed this girl. She came in, and she had her suit on. Everything was fine, but her shirt was open to about right here. And, she was, you could tell it, obviously, like that. And I was just like, and I liked her. I liked her as an interviewer. But I could not bring her up to the next step because I was not comfortable that I could ever put her in front of a client if that's how she approached me on a job interview, a first impression. There was no way I was thinking that I'm going to ever put this person in front of a client. So you do have to be careful with that. Just, dress professional. How do you differentiate yourself from others? And I'll tell you, how many people are on Facebook? Twitter? Oh, not as many. Wow. MySpace? Well, I think that was kind of, that's what I thought. I'm on Facebook. I got an aunt who's 65 who's on Facebook. We got, wide variety of people on Facebook. But, and I know you've heard this, but I'm going to say it. Clean it up or put it on private. We do look. I interviewed at Berry College and UGA. Over the past 2 or 3 years, I've interviewed people from those two schools. Every single person that I considered bringing in, I looked at their Facebook, I looked at their MySpace. Didn't have Twitter then, that's kind of a new thing, but I did look at those things. We do look. And a lot of them had it on private, and that was fine. I was like, I wonder what they're trying to hide. But, but I didn't know, so it didn't matter. But we do look at it. And I read an article the other night that said 70% of recruiters make a decision about people based on their Facebook page. 70% of recruiters. So again, that's that image. That's what picture do you have up there on your profile? Again, I tell everybody, just put it on private so that we can't see it. But you can change all those settings. But what picture profile do you have up? And what does it say? What's it telling me? Is this the person that's going to represent my company? Anybody in here ever Google themselves? Yeah, you should. Google yourself. Anybody ever respond to blogs? Or you guys, you get a blog, you ever respond to a blog? Has anybody responded to a blog in here? No? Okay. anything you put out there, if you respond to a blog or Evite, you ever had an Evite or some type of tool like that where you responded Evite? Those things actually you can find those in a Google search. So if I have your name, I can find what party you went to, and if you said I'm bringing the keg, you're hired. But, some people, maybe not. Maybe not. I don't know. But it depends. Anything you communicate there electronically, though, can be found. And I'm always amazed at the people, the stuff they write. And I Google myself. I don't write anything negative. I don't comment on my political views or any type of view that may be taken the wrong way because I just don't know who's going to come across it. I'm very aware of, you've heard the term, your personal brand. I'm very aware of my personal brand, my internet brand. So be aware of that because all the recruiters, they are using those tools. And you'd be amazed at the tools you have that you can find, that you can flip and find. It's amazing. I'll run through some basic stuff. Cologne, perfume, all that kind of stuff. Keep it to a minimum. Ornate jewelry, that kind of stuff. Like you have a big, whatever. Don't wear it. Anything big like that, just don't wear it. No chewing gum, mints, like heavy mints, heavy cough drops, that type of thing. Don't chew gum during the interview. Don't even bring it in. Turn your cell phone off or don't bring it with you. I wouldn't put it on vibrate because you hear it in the thing. I didn't, yes. Okay. Exactly. And his question, he's kind of what he's saying is, how in depth do we as recruiters really look at your Facebook, and do we make decisions? Do we dig in and look at every little thing and make decisions? The answer there is, and there's a lot of legal stuff circulating around this right now. It's still kind of uncharted waters. To answer your question, some recruiters do, some don't. I say don't take the chance, just make it private. But me personally, I don't. I really, I'm not going to dig in. I'll look at it. I'll just kind of see, is there anything there on the front? Okay. I really don't pay too much attention to your political views or religious views, things like that you made the note on there. I'm not going to really look at that and make a decision. I don't want to. But there are some people that will. There are some that do.
I had a friend, it was right, I guess it was the second year Facebook would be but she went to her interview, and the guy that was interviewing her had her profile picture.
Wow.
And her whole wall from like 2 days printed out sitting in front of her on the set. She had no idea.
Wow.
She got the interview, but still, just...
Yeah. So what she was saying is that her friend walks into the interview, and the interviewer's sitting there with her Facebook page, sitting there on the desk with everything from her last 2 days' activities on a wall post. Yeah, I would... That's a little weird.
You think about it. Some people do. They
yeah.
say, they'll cuss on their walls and stuff.
Sure.
That's like, if you do that, more power to you. But, if employers do print that out, that's just...
If it's online, it will be found.
The other thing is some corporations can actually buy your information from Facebook because anything you put on there is Facebook's property, so they can buy the rights to your profile and look up all your information anyway.
Yeah, he's saying that so people can buy your rights and buy anything like that from Facebook. So it's a whole different world. It really is. It's a whole different world. Also, a couple things. Somebody asked this. Don't bring water into your interview, even if you get thirsty and parched. Don't bring a water bottle. Don't bring that stuff in there. It doesn't bother me personally, but a lot of people it does. And like we were saying earlier, you're going to hear different views, and some people say it's okay. I try to kind of give you the general view. It doesn't bother me. If somebody brings a water bottle in, it's not going to bother me in the least. Nobody's ever drank the water they brought in. I've watched these things. Nobody ever has. They bring it in and sit it there. I'd say just don't bring it in because some people do get a little strange about that. Professional email. When you have your email address set up, and I kid you not, we were shutting down a facility, Panasonic. We had a vice president of project management. We were trying to help him. We're trying to help everybody find new jobs. He's a vice president level. His email address is sleepwhenimdead69@yahoo.com. Sleepwhenimdead69@yahoo.com. Email him, tell him Alex said hello. That was his real email address. This was the one he had on his resume. He's a vice president. This guy has 20 years experience. So if you got anything like that, maybe it's not to that degree, but if you have anything, any odd email, just, go to Gmail, set up a free one that you use just for interviewing purposes. A lot of times it used to be people had voicemails. So you had your voicemail set up, your answering machine, and nobody in here remembers Beavis and Butthead, obviously. That's when I was in college, but a lot of people on their college answering machine had Beavis and Butthead. We always take it off. Don't have anything like that. Simple, easy. Bring a notebook, portfolio, pen, bring all that stuff. I always recommend to people, too, and this is where it gets, kind of dicey, but, piercings, your bodily hygiene, you want to present clean. Piercings, again, they don't bother me, but it depends on who you're interviewing with. It depends on the type of job. I actually was interviewing a guy one time. We were looking for a web developer, and he came in and he had piercings and everything, and I didn't mind. I was like, he was obviously he was a creative guy, and I needed somebody creative, but the person that was going to hire him didn't like that, and he actually said he had an issue with it, and I said, well, but you're looking for somebody who can do the job, right? I mean, you're looking, but he didn't really care about that. So, he was like, older guy, he didn't want that. So, unfortunately, the guy didn't get hired. I think he was probably the better person for the job. I had an earring when I graduated college. By the way, I took it out when I started interviewing. That was about the extent of my wild side. Experience, like I said, you're not going to have a ton of experience. Yes?
If you have a tattoo, I have one on my wrist, it's really easy to cover up. But, obviously in an interview, you can wear a long sleeve, you can wear a big bracelet. But if you're going to be, I guess, around the person that's interviewing you a lot, should you go ahead and bring it up? Or should you...
So she said if you have a visible tattoo maybe on your wrist, which is pretty common or something like that, you're right, it's going to come up. So if the person's like that, I tell everybody that first impression, I'd go ahead and wear the sleeves. I actually hired somebody one time, and I didn't even think about looking for the tattoo, but she gave me a great recruiter. But then she came and reported to work, and my vice president of HR comes over to me. She goes, have you seen her tattoos? I'm like, I haven't seen her tattoos. What do you mean? She's like, yeah, it's right here. I'm like, well, how did you see a tattoo right there? And, I guess when she leaned up and, pants down, shirt up, and she saw it, I was like, okay, it doesn't bother me. And my conversation was, as long as when we're out and, we're interacting with people, just, try not to pull your shirt up and pants down. Just try to keep it covered. But yeah, in the interview, I think it's okay to cover that. Again, they're going to see it. It's going to come out. But don't let them make a judgment on you. Let them judge you on your skills, not on your tattoo.
I actually have a story about that. My dad was hiring me for his company, and a lady came in and she had a tattoo, looked at my tattoo, and she didn't tell them or just say anything about it. But then when she came to her first day of work, she wore something, and it obviously was big enough to make an impression because my dad was very upset that she hadn't mentioned it, or if she had mentioned it and at least tried to cover it, like it would have been okay. But since when she came to interview, she didn't say anything about it, and then she showed up on the first day of work. It was very visible, and she did not mention it. He was actually really upset.
She's kind of talking about not mentioning it versus mentioning it. And what I'll say to that is, depends on the job you're interviewing for. If you're going to be client-facing, interacting with different people outside of the company, representing a company, you might want, you're going to be in the summer, you're going to be at a booth, and you have short sleeves on, you might want to make them aware of it. I would get through the process, though. I wouldn't make that my first thing. Let them make a decision about you, and then they'll talk about that. But that'd be my recommendation in that situation. Let's see. So we're talking about, I kind of hit confidence and approachability, professionalism. Here, get there 15 minutes early to your interviews. Get there early. Don't be late. There's nothing worse than showing up late. And if you have some catastrophic event that occurs, call ahead, send the interviewer an apology note. You can do that by email. You can handwrite it, but make sure that they're aware that it was a catastrophe. I had a guy one time that didn't come to the interview. He was a tech graduate because he was waiting on Duke Georgia Tech tickets or North Carolina Georgia Tech tickets. He told me that. Now, I didn't have a problem with that necessarily, but I did have a problem that he didn't call ahead and cancel his interview and give somebody else the slot. The problem I had with it is he didn't handle it the right way. I didn't find out until after the fact. And that guy 3 years later sent me an email wanting a job, and I remembered his name and did not even forward him on to the hiring manager, even though he was a perfect fit. And the hiring manager remembered him too and said, I remember that guy, no thank you. It does stick around. So experience, jobs. We talked about being honest about your skills. Ask for references. If you've done a co-op, you've done an internship, you've had a job, ask those people to do references. On LinkedIn, there is a place where when you set up your profile, you can have people give you references. I can request a reference from somebody, and they can write me a reference right there. And employers do go to your LinkedIn page, and they do check that out. Know your resume. The worst thing is when you're sitting in an interview, and I ask a question, and the person takes the resume and they try to look at the resume to see where it's at on their resume. And, well, now, what did I say? Know your resume. Know what you put on there. That's a bad move. Back everything up with solid details. So if you tell me that you've done something, back it up with a detail. So, I used the story of the girl that was planning her wedding, but I actually hired another UGA grad. She was actually Miss UGA 2007, if anybody knows her. She was in a sorority here, very involved, and we talked a lot about her involvement, and it's a competitive business that we're in. So I was trying to determine how competitive is this person. She was just this nice, sweet, southern, South Georgia girl. And I was like, she's going to be tough enough for this. She's my top producer today, 2 years later, top producer. But we talked about her competitiveness, and she told me how competitive the pageants were and everything. I didn't know anything about that kind of stuff. She was telling me how competitive it was. She talked about her sorority and some of the things they'd set up and how she was organized. But she used things that she had done to tell me how she was organized, how she was competitive. It worked, and it was true. So, and she was. If she hadn't been very competitive, she wouldn't have lasted very long in the job. Initiative. Tangible preparation. I'll tell you what. This is something. We all have resumes, and everybody's, how can I stand out? How can I be different? Build a portfolio. A lot of times your web people, your engineering people, they have portfolios of their work, marketing people, but do a portfolio of your work, of your background, of your experience. I'm a recruiter. I have a portfolio that people can go online and see and do that. So it could be different projects you've worked on, and it could be in a slide form. It's very easy. And there's a software called slideshare.net. It's free. It's online. Just go to slideshare.net. You can share presentations, so I can share this with the world. I can share it with a group of people. I can put it on my LinkedIn profile, whatever I want to do, and you can have your profile. So it keeps me from just looking at another piece of paper. I can actually go through, and you can add pictures, video, whatever you want to do. So think about something like that. Let's see. Ask for a business card. Now, this is something I learned at a Japanese company. It's a Japanese custom. When you take a business card, they don't just take it, look at it, stick it in their pocket. You take it, you study it, and you sit it down. They actually have a specific order they set it in based on the level of the person. I never learned that level, but nobody ever looked to see if I was doing it right. But get that business card, ask for it, set it in front of you, because it's very easy to forget somebody's name. But if I get that business card and I've got it sitting in front of me, then I can kind of glance down. I don't want to say, if you got bad eyesight, bring the glasses or make sure you remember the name. But just, you can glance at it. Is there a question? Okay. Discuss projects, work assignments where you noticed an issue and you suggested a solution. So a lot of times you've worked on projects, you've done team projects, you've done group projects. What you want to do is talk about where you suggested, where you saw there was an issue and you came up with a solution, because everybody's looking for somebody that's solution-oriented. I don't mind. I tell my team, you can come to me with any issues you have. You can tell me any problems. If you got a problem with me, tell me. But I want you to have a solution as well. I want you to tell me how we're going to solve the problem, at least what you recommend, so that we can get going, not just a complaint. Have examples of when you've done that. And I'm sure you can think of tons. And you're 4 to 6 years. I was on the advanced bachelor's program. I was in college 6 years for my bachelor's degree. I love college. So I did a lot. But so I had lots of things that I could talk about. But talk about those things. From a class perspective, from a project, there's tons of ideas, tons of things you can come up with there. Education, highlight how your education matches your goals. So I'm in mathematics because my goal is this. And, you know, I know I like mathematics. And one of the questions I ask is, why did you choose the school you chose? And why'd you choose the major you chose? That's two things I want to know. But talk about how that highlights into your long-term goals. Why you chose your major. Address the GPA. Yes. An honest answer. You know, I went to Alabama because I grew up in Alabama. I always wanted to go to school there. You know, that was my honest answer. So maybe you grew up here and it was close to home, or maybe you wanted to get far away from home. You know, maybe it's far away from home. Maybe you got a scholarship. You know, there's tons of reasons. So I would say whatever the honest reason is. Maybe you got Hope Scholarship, and you know you can choose a state school, and Georgia's the biggest in the state. Whatever the honest answer is, that's fine. And you can find a way to work something in. So if it is hope or it is, you know, scholarship, then you can kind of work that into the conversation without just, you know, hey, I'm on Hope Scholarship. You know, you can actually work it into the conversation, which usually people put that on their resume. Address your GPA concerns directly. So if you have a lower GPA, the question's going to come up. What I notice is if I don't have a GPA on a resume, typically the notes to me that the GPA is low, and that's going to be one of the first things I ask somebody about. Yes.
How often, or what is there any kind of practice to hold your GPA in context depending on major in school? Like, if you compare tech and GPA,
Sure.
people at tech, especially in engineering school, have much lower GPAs on average than GPAs in one grade. And I would just wonder, I mean, the major I'm in is not a very difficult major, so if I had a high GPA in the major, I have a high GPA, would that just be discarded? Would that not really, would that not matter at all? Because I guarantee that someone in tech with a GPA a little bit lower, you know, works a lot harder and try a lot smarter.
So this question is kind of relating to GPAs. Does it matter like across the school or across, you know, anything? And I would say it really depends. I mean, I do look at the major. So I look at a business marketing, and I look at PR communications, which I had both. And I don't know. I kind of look at the overall GPA. I kind of look at 3.0 or higher for myself personally. That's me. I like 3. Some companies have a company policy. I'm only going to hire a 3.25 and better, or you can only come in here on a co-op if you have this GPA. Got one here, one there. So.
Okay, I have a question. What if you started school and say failed a year,
Mm-hmm.
and then you left, got work experience,
Mhm.
full time, and then came back? It doesn't matter what you do, your GPA is never going to reach. Doesn't matter if you make straight A's.
Mm-hmm. And this is where I go back to what I said earlier. I think that's a perfect explanation. I wouldn't try to defend it. I wouldn't try to say, well, this series. I would just say, you know what? I started school. I was there for a year. I didn't take it serious. I suffered the consequences of it. I went out and got a job, realized what I wanted to do, my long-term goals. So I came back. And if you look at these last 3 years, you can see specifically what I did in my major. You can see where my GPA changed. I can't change that .02, but I can change that next 3. And I've had people do that, and I'm okay with that. Most people are okay with that.
So it's generally kind of like an elephant in the room type of a deal.
It is. It really is.
There, you might as well just talk about it.
Just knock it out. Just be prepared to discuss. Maybe you worked your way through school. If you financed 100% of your school and your education, and you were working. I had an uncle. He worked at NASA and all this kind of stuff. Real smart guy. He got a B in a class. He was an engineering major, and he was married, had a kid in college. He went to his professor, talked to him after the fact. The professor, and he brought his daughter with him. I'm like, that's smart. You know what the professor told him? Said, if I had known that you had a family, he said, I would have been easier probably during the semester on you. So if you got a little sister, cousin, niece. But you do want to take things in context. And again, just explain it. Here's what it is. Here's why it is the way it is. And here's why I'm serious now. And here's what I want to do to move forward. So that's how I would say address it.
Okay, you have to realize also that the University of Georgia as an advisor, I cannot give, legally, I can't give your GPA out. And the University of Georgia can't either. Last I heard that's confidential. So a student asked me once, said, well, if that is in fact true, that your parents can't even get, no one really can get that unless you give permission.
They could when I was in school.
You give permission for your transcripts. And they may ask that. Of course, the company could say, in other words, you got to be honest with the GPA, because if they really want to push it, they simply say, do you give us permission or provide us with your transcripts? So what's on your transcripts better match up pretty good with what's on your resume. Now, I've had some of my students say, well, how about I separate out my major courses, that you're studying, because my GPA is higher that way, and I put my overall, and that's another approach, it makes it look, a little bit better. But you better be sure, even though you say, well, they really can't call the University of Georgia and get my transcripts. They can't. It won't happen. You have to get permission to get that. But if they do ask you, I would imagine you better agree to go ahead and get your transcripts form, or it's pretty much going to seal the deal that you're hiding something or whatever. So, and I would disagree with the person who said a 3.9 or 3.8 at Georgia Tech might be better than a 3.8 or 3.9 here at UGA. Okay, I mean, and even not talking about even majors. I think grade point averages, they really do vary a lot. And I think there's great inflation that goes on at Tech, as there may
Sure.
be at some courses at University of Georgia. So I do not hold the Georgia Tech graduates to any higher level than our graduates here at the University of Georgia. So that, okay?
And I concur.
Okay.
So, but yeah, definitely split it. And people will ask for those transcripts, by the way. I'll go ahead and tell you, they're going to ask for them. I've had it come back and it didn't match, and I've had it come back and it did. And I'll look at the major. I consider the last 2 years. I know what it's like to be in college. This is me personally. I know the first year what happens. I know the second year. I know that you get your major. It's something you're talking about the passion, why you like doing this. I'm not a math guy. I mean, I'm just not. So I get low scores in math, but I love the marketing and the sales piece and things like that. So A's and B's there. So you can separate that, and that's totally acceptable. So relationship, and this is talking about kind of your knowledge, your real world experience, and your business acumen. And this is a key thing. Business acumen is this is something that every recruiter looks for. Does this person understand business? And I'll tell you, when I was going to school, I didn't understand anything about business. I grew up in a town of population 500 on a farm, and my dad did construction. I didn't have a clue about how business worked, ran. I didn't know anything about it, but I learned, and I figured it out. So they want to know that you understand how business works, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But knowledge, research the company, obviously, their size, their locations, how do they operate. You got LinkedIn, Google, Bing. You got all these ways you can get information. Use it. Get tons of information. You can't have enough. Know the role. Know the regular task. Know the typical goals of the job. Be able to demonstrate how they can actually do those activities. So show how you can actually do those activities. So if you know this job involves selling and you're going to be selling to another business, talk about that. Talk about how you've done that. I've had people that sold encyclopedias here at school. I had another one. They sold the Greek directory. So if you got any Greeks here, you have the Greek directory. I hired a person because she had sold the Greek directory, and she had sold the most Greek directories 2 years ago. Hired her, and she was great. Real-world experience, try to relate your life experience to the company's goals and needs. So if you understand what the company goals are, you understand what the needs of the company are, try to relate, some of your real life experiences to that. Discuss that transition. You went from home to college. That's a huge transition. Now you're going from college to work, and I always ask people about that. What was that transition like for you when you first stepped on campus, and what's it like now 4 years later or 6 years later? What's it like? Business acumen, and going back to that on the thing, I had a note here also. One of the big fears for employers, my first job, I left Alabama, had never left the state. My first job was in Toledo, Ohio. And their big fear, and I'll never forget, Mike Lashewski is the guy that interviewed me, and his big thing is, do you have a girlfriend? I was like, well, yeah. He's like, what's she going to think about you moving? I was like, I don't know. He had somebody that had moved up there from Alabama, from Tennessee, actually, took the job, left after 3 months because he missed his girlfriend. I knew that was a fear of his when he left the interview, and I thought, this is going to be the only thing that gets in my way. So I called him 2 days later, and I said, I'm sure I slaughtered his name. It's Lashewski, but I'm sure I slaughtered it. But I called him, and I said, hey, I just wanted to let you rest assured that, that's not an issue. And I kind of gave a little story. I said, I'm serious about this. If it involves moving to Toledo, I'll do it. I don't want to settle there. But you're saying I can be there for a year or two and then move back south. I said, I'm 100% on board. And I got the interview and got the job. So be honest. But they do have fears, and they make assumptions based on those fears. So if you think that there might be some fear factor there, address it with them. Yes?
On average, how many interviews
courses should you go through? So how many interviews before you know if you got the job? You know, you're going to go through that initial interview probably with the recruiter when you're coming through the campus, and then you may go through 1 to 2 rounds. It depends on the company, and I'd say understand what their process is so that you don't get kind of frustrated, but find out what their recruiting process is. You got to meet with different levels of management and things like that. Sometimes it's a one-person decision. It just depends. No problem. Communication, written, verbal, body language, all these things real quickly. You know, written, you know, writers or readers. And I'll ask people, how many books have you read in the last month or two? I don't personally love reading, but I do it because I like to write, I like to blog, I like to do these things, and the more I read, the better I write. You know, size matters. When you write something, go back and try to make it shorter. So when you write your resume, you know, look at it, and if you got this long sentence, try to shorten it. See how short you can make it, and try to get the same impact out of fewer words, and that'll go a long way. And it'll also help you to remember your resume a little better. And the more time you spend trying to do that, it's just going to come natural. You're going to remember it. You know, read your resume and thank you notes out loud. Make sure they flow. Handwritten thank you notes. Can't stress that enough. Handwritten thank you notes. Emails are fine. I don't mind them personally. A lot of people love the handwritten. So we've actually done business with clients because we sent them a handwritten thank you note, and it stood out enough to them, and they told us that, wow, nobody does that anymore. We want to do business with you guys. It's happened. Verbal, you know, great. Last impression. Make sure that you know what you need to know about yourself. Make sure you know yourself so that you can communicate that. Don't start conversations with, I was just going to say, I'm not sure if I'm right, but I don't know. This is probably a stupid question because there's no stupid questions. But don't start your conversations with that. You know, be direct. You know, use disclosure openings as conversation starters. They kind of ease that communication. What I mean by that, this is my first interview, and if it is your first interview, hey, this is my first interview. I'm going to know that you're a little nervous, and I'm going to know, and it kind of tees it up to let me know, okay, this person's never interviewed before, they're going to be a little nervous. That's okay. That is okay for me. You know, I'm really excited to learn more about your company, and this will open them up because they're going to say, well, what do you know already? What do you know now? So better know something. But, you know, hey, I'm excited to learn more about your company. I've researched you on your website, on your blog, and I've talked to my cousin's brother that works over there. But I'm anxious to hear what you have to say from that insider perspective. Body language, don't fold your arms, don't cross your legs. You know, don't put elbows on the table, don't clench your hands. You know, I think some of the questions, one person actually had asked the question, as a guy, can I cross my legs? No. Don't do that, please. You know, and the best way when you're sitting, if you're going to talk to an interview, the best way to do it is have your toes pointed towards when you're sitting here and I'm facing that. And that from a body language perspective, what that tells me is that, you know, you're open and you're honest. But if I'm sitting like this and talking to you, it's a whole different body language. And it's all that subliminal stuff. It does play in. Do some research also. You can tons of research on positive body language. Research that. Video yourself. I used to hear that and I was like, yeah, whatever. What did it? I actually had a company I was going through a leadership program, and they actually videoed me. And I watched the video with my wife, and I'm like, I do that? She's like, all the time. I was like, wow. I didn't know that. Dude, it helps. Questions and answers. Ask questions. Ask good questions. So be prepared to, when you go in, to have a couple of questions. You know, start with an introduction always. What can you tell about yourself? Ask questions throughout. So be conversational. Again, we talked about that earlier. Be conversational. End with good questions. You know, was there anything you were looking for that we didn't discuss? Because sometimes the interviewer, if you're the 6th interviewer of the day and you're at the end, they just kind of get tired of asking, to be honest. When you're going through the campus stuff, try to get those early slots. Get those 8:30 slots. I love people to get those slots. If you can, if your schedule permits. Ability to listen. You know, don't talk yourself out of a job. And this happens a lot. People just talk and talk and talk and talk. They talk themselves right out of the job. And I've had that happen. Relax, you know, be confident, listen, be conversational. Have those 90-second, 30-second to 120-second responses. Long-term outlook, leadership and goals. Discuss your leadership roles, sororities, fraternities, intramural sports, church activities, campus clubs, organizations, class projects. You all have some type of leadership that you've done. If you don't, you still got time to get it, especially Freshman, sophomore, you got time. Juniors, you got time. Seniors, you got a couple of months. Do something, do it. Those are very important. Here's a difference. Also, understand this, and this will help you throughout your career. Leadership and management are two different things. And I'll tell you, number one, I'll say, what are your 5-year goals? And I get the response, I want to be a manager. And my question is, what's your plan to get there? And it's dead silence every time. No one has plans. So if you tell me you want to be a manager in 5 years, be able to tell me your plan, what you're doing to get there. Well, I'm reading this book. I'm reading this book. And there's a difference in leadership and management. Management is me telling somebody what to do, me giving out duties. And a manager can be a leader. A leader is somebody who wants to follow me. They want to come in. They want to do. They want to work for me for whatever reason. Understand those differences. Research that. Have professional and personal goals. Be prepared to discuss your professional and your personal goals. You don't want to get too personal in the interview. I mean, don't get too personal. But again, you can talk about personal goals. If it's a sales position, obviously that's always good. People want to buy this kind of car and this kind of house, or maybe your goal is to live in Atlanta and get a place downtown. I mean, talk about your personal goals, because what I'm looking for is that you have goals, that you're driven towards something. And tell me about some goals that you have that you've achieved. So general, I'm going to run through some do's and don'ts here really quick. Here's some don'ts. Don't ask about gym memberships and benefits and all that. The appropriate time for that is maybe after you've been through one or two of the interview cycles and you're at the end and get to the offer stage, you'll talk about that. These things have really happened. Don't bring your spouse, your dog, your cat, your energy drink. Don't bring it with you. It happens. I had a girl that interviewed. They actually brought her mom, and her mom waited outside the lobby with her. She got the job, but don't ask what the company does or when you get time off. You should already know that. Don't elaborate on personal things, particularly if they're negative and make you look desperate. Like, thanks for asking today actually kind of sucked. I got an eviction notice, and my cat really needs surgery. I can't afford it. I've had people do it. These are real stories. Don't trust MapQuest, Google, or GPS 100%. If you got the opportunity, you can go find the company the night before, do a drive-by, and go find it. If you can't, leave early. I mean, I didn't know where I was coming today, and I left in plenty of time, still didn't know where I was going, saw the building, then it was parking. Man, parking is terrible. I was like, can I park here? And they're like, no, you'll get a ticket. I'm like, how much is the ticket? And it's like I saw the tow sign. I was like, I better not do that. So I got pointed in the right direction, but I got here in plenty of time. Give yourself plenty of time. Do leave your ego outside. There's always someone better out there, and they may be sitting in the lobby. So don't get in there. Don't be overconfident. Be confident. Don't be overconfident. Dress professionally, always, always, no matter what position you're applying for, no matter what the job is, always, always dress professionally. Take pride in what you wear, Buy an iron. I tell people this. I'm like, I had a guy one time he interviewed, and he came, he had his tie, had his shirt, had everything, and it was a mock interview, but he had on this, like, silky, frilly white shirt, and it was like silk and ruffly, and I was like, I told him, I said, look, he said, well, it's kind of tough, I'm in college, I don't have any money. I said, I'm going to be honest with you. Go to Belk, go to, whatever, $15, you can get a nice shirt, nice white cotton shirt, and you get an iron for a couple of bucks. I mean, just do that. Your roommate will help you out, I promise. Somebody will help you out. Call me. I'll find somebody to help you out. Always, always, always show up early. Always make sure you know the name of the person you're meeting with. You'd be amazed how many people don't. Always treat each person, treat everybody with respect and kindly. And I'll tell you this, when I interviewed for people at Panasonic, every time somebody interviewed, when they got done, I escorted them out. I walked down with them. I went to the reception desk, and I said, Alice, what'd you think about that person? Alice was this, this older lady, and that's all she sat there, and she loved to talk to people. She loved to talk about people. And she would tell me exactly what they did. She said, I didn't like them because of this, this, and this, or I really liked them because of this, this, and this. And I took a lot of, whenever Alice told me, I listened. And it worked into the decision-making. So be nice to everybody. Let's see, explain your qualifications and goals, how they complement the company mission. We talked about that. Express interest in the job. Doesn't hurt to ask for the job. If you want it, don't ask for it if you don't want it. But if you want it, ask for it. Ask if the interviewer has any hesitations about you. And then, see if you guys can talk about, a polite way to overcome them. I mean, a lot of times somebody won't, but if somebody asks me, is there any concerns you have, I will tell them. And a lot of times they say, well, let me restate that. I didn't mean it that way. And that's okay. Let's figure it out. Thank each person you meet personally. Send them the handwritten thank you notes. Bring several copies of your resume. That was one of the questions. Bring several copies of your resume. I know that you probably emailed it to them, and I know that they probably got it in their email somewhere. They got 100 of them in their email somewhere. Bring it with you, along with your portfolio that you make that makes you stand out. Let your references know that they're listed as a reference. I've gotten phone calls, and it's like, hey, you worked with so-and-so. I'm like, yeah. Well, they listed you as a reference. I was like, really? Didn't really want to give them a reference. So do that. Common questions, that they're going to ask, tell me about yourself. This is going to be an opener. What's your greatest accomplishment? What's your greatest weakness? How do you handle stress? What is the toughest problem you face, and how did you overcome it? Why do you want this position? Why are you the best person for this job? These are basic general questions. Yes, ma'am. I would say do not do that in the initial interview. No. I would wait till you get to the offer stage for that. Usually entry level, they've got an idea of what they have in mind. And sometimes they're going to mention it. Sometimes you're going to get in there and the HR person is typically going to say, this is the range of job. They're going to give you an application to fill out, and they give you a range. Put a range in there. But be prepared that what they're going to do, if you put 30 to 35, they're going to offer you 30. If you put 35 to 40 and the job pays 32, you're not going to get an offer, most likely. So do keep that in mind.
What about when you're talking to them about yourself, and like you tell that, like I had an internship that I mentioned that I applied to some grad schools or whatever, and I think they got turned off and they wanted me to go straight into it.
Yeah.
So should you not mention that stuff?
I would. I mean, kind of, you're probably at a decision point. Do I want to go to grad school? Do I not? I'm kind of seeing what jobs are out there. I would say to myself, I would say, what's the likelihood I'm going to go to grad school? If I'm like 75, 80% in the door, I might. But if I'm kind of 50-50, want to see, I may not bring up grad school. I do the interview because I might. But then I'd want to know in my mind, if I find this in a job, A, B, C, D, E, I find that in a job, then I'm not going to go to grad school. I'm going to take a job. And that's what I'd focus on, looking for those things in a job. So, and I'm sorry, the question was, do you mention, if you go to grad school or not, do you say that? Do you say I'm going to grad school? So.
Question, Alex.
Yes.
I think a question on that one, I think the biggest challenge for all of us is they ask you, and I think it's a great question, is what's your greatest weakness? You don't really want to make yourself look bad. Do you really want to point out your greatest weakness? You may not even think you have one, but then you may have one that you don't really want to share. So I don't know if you ask that question or what recommendation you can give to the students and saying, okay, now here's how you can handle that diplomatically.
Yeah, and here's what I would say is, if you're asked that question, and a lot of people, they don't say, what's your greatest weakness? They say, what's an improvement area that you have? That's how I typically ask it. What areas do you need to improve upon? We all have something. Don't say, I tend to expect others to work as hard as I do, or I'm a bit of a perfectionist. That's a BS answer. I know that. You know that. I use that answer. It's not a good answer. But state a true improvement area. But also, so here's an area I could work on. You know what? I'm not the most organized, but here's how I'm working on it. This past year, I realized it was my senior year, and I really had to get organized. So I bought a planner. I bought an organizer. I did this. I loaded everything in my PDA. I got this app for my iPhone. Whatever. But so address the weakness, but also how you're addressing that and how you're working to overcome that. That's a good way to address that. The tell me about yourself. Focus on personal, professional values. Highlight experiences you're proud of. Greatest accomplishment. Choose an example that was helpful to an employer, something that helps an employee or a project that you worked on if you're working in a group together. Greatest strength. Focus on your top 3 strengths. Because nothing's worse because they usually ask, what's your greatest strength? You list, 3 things, and then what's your greatest weakness? And you list 10 things for your greatest strength, and you got 1 weakness. I'm like, what? So be careful about that. Just focus on those top 3 strengths that you have. Your leadership skills, your team building skills, your organizational skills, all are important. How do you handle stress? Tell them how you do time management, how you problem solve, how you make decisions. Toughest problem you've ever overcome. That's one where I'll tell people, it may not be a school issue. Maybe, as a freshman, you didn't have a clue. You've never been away from home. That's a stressful situation. How did you handle that? Maybe you immersed yourself into a group of friends or whatever. That's fine. What do you want from this position? Now, this is where you research. So you've researched the company. You're fully knowledgeable about them. You know exactly what they do. This is why you get to tell them, I want to come work here because of this, and you're relating information about the company. Why are you the best person? Emphasize several reasons they should hire you. You know, you've got experience in this. Kind of, you know, you're making that match. You know, they're always going to end it with any last questions, and they ask, do you have any questions? If you don't have any questions, that shows a lack of initiative. If somebody doesn't have questions, and I've had many interviewers that came back to me and said, you know what, I asked them if they had any questions. They said they didn't. I've had people that were interviewing at a president level of big companies, and the person went all the way through the interview. They loved them. He had to go and fly to California because he was going to go meet with the president, the head CEO. He gets there, CEO says, you know, and it was like a 30-minute meeting. Literally, you're flying from East Coast to West Coast for a 30-minute meeting. The CEO says, do you have any questions for me? And the guy said, no, they've all been answered. He didn't get the job because of that, because he didn't have any questions for the CEO. Always have questions. Prepare your questions in advance. Have them listed out. Relate them to the company or its accomplishments and challenges. And don't ask a question that would indicate that you did not research the company. So don't ask something that you should already know, like, what's your products or what do you do? That's going to be bad. Ask the interviewer. Here's something you can ask them. What do you enjoy most about working here? I love it when people ask me that, and I'll tell them exactly. And somebody will ask me, what do you like least? I'll tell you honestly. I tell people my interview styles. I'm going to tell you the good. I'm going to tell you the bad, and you can make the decision whether this is something you want or not. Not everybody's like that. They're painting all the good stuff. So it doesn't hurt to say, what do you like about it? And hey, what are some of the struggles that you might have day to day, or some of the struggles somebody would have in this position? Another one, is there anything I mentioned that makes you think I'm not the best candidate for the job? We talked about that. And when do you expect to make the final decision? Or, as you were saying earlier, what's your interview process? Anything along that line. So, any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I know that you said that you're looking for uniqueness sometimes in the dress, like tan or something like that. But what if there's a certain color that makes you feel very confident, and that color may seem a little invasive? Should you wear that color? Should you wear it flat?
It's going to depend on the color, and I'll tell you this. I had somebody, a recruiter of mine, she said, hey, I got this great guy. He's going to interview, and he told me he was going to wear his lucky purple suit. And I said, no, he's not. So you do have to be careful. You know, when you're going in that interview, you don't know what that company's like, conservative, and I would always say, you know, you may have that bright color that you love, but, you know, go with the simple, the black suit, the black outfit. You can't go wrong with that. No problem.
Would it be a good idea if they cut off my dreadlocks?
Depends on the job you're interviewing for. And depends on what you want to do, you know, what your career path is. If you were going into a sales role where you're going to be interfacing with, you know, CEOs of company, I'd say, yeah, if I'm just giving you advice as a friend. But if you're a web developer and you want to do web development, you're going to kind of work in that creative type environment, it's not a problem. So it just depends on the environment.
A lot of times you upload your resume online and like submit an application, and there's always that box with like any additional information, and it says optional. What's the meaning of the box?
So the question is, if there's any, you upload your resume and it says, is there any additional information? Is it in reference to, is it in the application or?
No, like you have your application ready with
Got it.
number, everything, and then there's just like this optional box to write.
So an optional box to write in. You know what? I'd say if you got something, do it. Maybe if you write a blog, which nobody lifted their hand about blogs, but if you do write a blog or something like that, you can put that in there. If you have some kind of, if you know something about the job and you've done something that specifically matches that, you didn't get to put that in the application, I would put that in there. So anything that would make you stand out, if the job was for a salesperson and you had sold encyclopedias or something, you didn't get to put that in the application, put that in there and talk about your volume that you sold, where you rank, things like that. So, yes, sir.
Tasteful humor. How much is too much?
Tasteful humor, how much is too much? That's a good question, because I'm one of those, when I'm interviewing somebody, I want to get to know them a little bit, and, you know, I'm okay with a little humor, but I'd just say be careful. I had a guy that interviewed for a job, and my recruiter, she's sitting there with me, and he goes, I like to do the icebreaker. He said, I've got this joke I always tell. And he looks at her, and he says, well, I don't know if you're going to get offended or not. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, then don't tell it. So if it's going to be something that could potentially even remotely be offensive or anything like that, then obviously don't do it. But a little bit of humor is not bad. It shows your personality. Yes, it's okay. She asked if during the interview they ask where else are you interviewing, and they will ask that. I do ask that. Tell them. I don't have a, I always tell people, tell me where you're interviewing. I want to know who else is looking at you. And it also helps prompt them along. So if you're one of their top candidates, it's going to make them move even quicker. I asked somebody that, and she said, well, I'm interviewing with this company, this company, and this company. They were all recruiting companies. So I'm like, okay, we've all seen something here. We've got a mutual interest in this person. I need to move fast. And then I also knew who I was competing against, so I knew what information to give. So it never hurts. And it just showed, again,